Welcome to Pinoy True Crime Story, where we uncover the Philippines' most shocking, haunting, and unforgettable cases. Tonight, we revisit a crime that shocked the nation in 1993. The brutal murder of Elsa Castillo, forever remembered as one of the country's most chilling chop-chop lady cases. In the Philippines, few words can send chills down the spine as quickly as chop-chop lady. A phrase that first entered the national consciousness in the 1960s with the case of Lucila Lalu, it became synonymous with horror, betrayal, and violence committed against women. By the early 1990s, that grim phrase resurfaced in headlines once again. This time, the name attached was Elsa Castillo. It was September 24, 1993. Residents in Bagak, Bataan, woke to a gruesome discovery. Along a quiet roadside, wrapped in plastic and bags, were pieces of a human body. At first, authorities were hesitant to identify the remains, but as more parts were found, a terrifying truth began to emerge. A woman had been killed, her body dismembered, and her remains discarded like garbage. News traveled quickly. Within days, police pieced together enough evidence to identify the victim. Elsa Castillo, a Filipina in her early 30s, a woman who, to her friends and neighbors, seemed ordinary, yet whose fate would etch her name permanently into the country's history of violent crime. Elsa was not just another faceless name in a police blotter. She was, according to reports, connected to an American businessman living in the Philippines. His name was Stephen Mark Hunt. To the outside world, Hunt projected wealth and influence. He drove expensive cars, had a personal driver, and carried himself with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. But behind that facade, dark secrets were waiting to spill into the open. The investigation into Elsa's death moved quickly. Witnesses placed her in the company of Hunt in the days leading up to her disappearance. Friends told police that she had been romantically involved with him, but that their relationship had soured. Arguments were frequent, tempers flared, and Elsa, it seemed, had been planning to walk away. Whether it was jealousy, anger, or a sense of betrayal that triggered what followed, only Hunt himself could ever truly explain. According to testimony later presented in court, on that fateful September evening, Elsa was lured into Hunt's residence in Green Hills, San Juan. There, an argument escalated. In a fit of rage, Hunt fatally stabbed Elsa. But killing her was not enough. To cover his tracks, he turned to someone close, his own driver, Demetrio Ravello. Under Hunt's instructions, Elsa's body was dismembered. The parts were placed in bags and quietly transported out of Metro Manila, all the way to Bataan, where they were left by the roadside. But secrets like this rarely stay buried. It was Ravello's later testimony that sealed Hunt's fate. He told investigators the chilling details, how his employer had ordered the dismemberment, how they had disposed of the body, and how Elsa's life was brutally ended inside that Green Hills home. The trial that followed captivated the nation. Here was an American, wealthy and connected, standing accused of one of the most brutal murders in recent Philippine history. The courtroom was tense, the media relentless. For many Filipinos, the case was more than just about Elsa. It was about justice itself. Could a foreigner with money and influence be made accountable in a country where ordinary people often felt powerless in the face of privilege? After months of hearings, witness testimonies, and mounting evidence, the court delivered its decision. Stephen Mark Hunt was convicted of murder. The ruling was clear. No wealth, no citizenship, no influence could erase the gravity of his crime. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, a punishment that, at least to some degree, gave closure to Elsa's grieving family. But the story didn't end there. Hunt would spend nearly 2 decades behind bars in the Philippines. During his incarceration, his name occasionally resurfaced in the media, often attached to discussions about crime, punishment, and justice. But in December 2012, something unexpected happened. Citing good behavior, his sentence was commuted and he was released from prison. Not long after, in February 2013, Philippine authorities deported him back to the United States. He was also blacklisted by the Bureau of Immigration, ensuring he would never set foot in the country again. For many, this brought mixed emotions. On one hand, the justice system had worked. Hunt had been convicted, had served time, and was expelled from the country. But on the other, the brutality of Elsa's murder left scars that no prison term could ever erase. Her life was gone, cut short in a moment of violence and betrayal. And the manner of her death, dismembered, discarded, became part of the Philippines' grim history of chop-chop lady cases, a phrase that carried with it both fear and outrage. Looking back, the case of Elsa Castillo is more than just a crime story. It is a reminder of the vulnerability of women in abusive relationships, of the dangers of power imbalances, and of the courage it takes for witnesses, like Ravelo, to come forward against those who seem untouchable. It is also a story about the Philippine justice system, flawed but capable, slow but, at times, determined to hold criminals accountable regardless of who they are. Today, Elsa's name is remembered alongside other victims whose lives were brutally taken and whose deaths became symbols of injustice. Her story continues to haunt true crime discussions in the Philippines, not just for its horror, but for the deeper questions it raises about love, power, betrayal, and justice. Because in the end, the story of Elsa Castillo is not only about her tragic death, it is about a society forced to look at itself and ask, how do we protect the vulnerable? How do we hold the powerful accountable? And how do we make sure that the phrase, "chop chop lady," is never again attached to another innocent victim? This is the story of Elsa Castillo, a life cut short, a death that shocked the nation, and a case that remains one of the most infamous crimes in Philippine history. This has been Pinoy True Crime Story, bringing you the darkest and most compelling crime stories from the Philippines. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thank you for listening, and remember, every story is a lesson, and every victim deserves to be remembered.